Next, we have Yancy Ribbens, Tech at Nagios. Give him a big round of applause.
All right, thanks, guys. Can everybody hear me okay? The mic on? Okay. All right, well, let's get started. So today I'll be talking about agent deployment, and this is going to be based on a new tool that's been developed. It's kind of been a brainchild of mine for some time now. Just some background. I started at Nagios about 1 year ago today. And so my first week on the job was actually at the first World Conference last year. And from the presentations that I attended, this seemed to be a real hot topic. Basically, how do we deploy agents? How do we configure them? From the Nagios side, without a lot of prereq and a lot of groundwork as far as deployments go. So that kind of spurred the idea of what are some of the ways we can tackle this. So in this presentation today, I'm going to discuss how we can deploy NSClient. This is templated on 0.3.9, which is the current stable release. We'll also look at how we could deploy the 0.4 version for those interested. So when it's deployed, we'll look at different configuration options, such as configuring NRPE, configuring checkNT, pushing updated config files, running the uninstaller. We're also going to take a look at some of the blueprints as far as how this whole thing's put together, and how we can customize recipes for future deployments. Okay, so probably most of you are familiar with the concept of agents, but just real quick, they're useful because they allow us to gather metrics such as CPU, memory, disk usage. Agent software on the client side is very useful because we can run custom scripts to basically monitor any type of custom environment settings we might have. And we also have some examples here of what agents might be, such as checkNRPE, checkNT, and NRPE, as well as NRDS-Win. So some of the current solutions out there for deploying software, for example, Microsoft SCCM, it's pretty resource intensive. There's a lot of moving parts. It requires you to have DNS, domain controller, WSUS in some instances, etc. There's also Puppet, which I haven't actually used, but I know it's very popular amongst the Linux environment. But from what I've looked at for Windows deployment, there's still a lot of setup, and you'd also need to deploy some software to the Windows machine first before you can start pushing your agent software. Okay, so why is Npush so great? Well, this solution requires no client-side configuration. It allows us to just template agent installs, so we can create one template and use it over and over again for many clients. And obviously, we can deploy agent software remotely. Okay, so some of the other benefits. It's built directly into Nagios XI. And we've already talked about that. Okay, so so some of the really cool things that Npush can do, and we'll see a demonstration of this. After running Npush from within XI, in this demonstration, it's going to build the INI file for us. So it's going to build the nsc.ini file. It's going to automatically populate in the IP address of the Nagios server. We're also going to enable use file option, and it's going to randomly generate a password. And then we can take that password and plug it into our checkNT wizard as we're running it on the Nagios XI side. So let's take a look at how that interaction will look. Okay, so here's the the Npush interface on the right-hand side here. And then on the left pane is a remote Windows 2008 machine. So basically I'm populating the IP address of that Windows machine along with a valid username and password. And the check NT option was selected. So basically all the requirements for monitoring with check NT are basically templated in. So once the install finishes, it presents the randomly generated password. And we'll be looking at how you can actually set your own password if you'd like. So if you caught it, NSClient now is appearing in the program files list of this remote agent. And so now I'm just going through the check NT install wizard. And I'm just using the generated password that was created via Npush. And we're just keeping the default settings the same. So now we're basically waiting for the check data to come in. And what I'm doing is I'm showing the different sections that Npush generated in this INI file before deploying it to the client. And basically here's all the DLLs that have been uncommented for this deployment. And we'll be looking at actually what the template looks like before this is deployed. So this takes some time to come back, so let's fast forward a little bit. And as you can see in the right, the check data is populating from check NT. So that was pretty cool. So how do we actually, if we wanted to do, say, so let's say we want to use our NRPE installer. NRPE is nice because you can do things like run external scripts. NRPE uses SSL, so it's in that manner it's a bit more secure than checkNT. So basically, here's all of the common settings that it enables in the INI file. So enable SSL, it defaults the ports, enables command argument processing, allow meta characters, populates allowed host IP with the Nagios IP, enables use file, and also enables the common modules for check NRPE. Okay, so basically I'm just trying to query the check NRPE daemon from the shell here. And as you can see, no data was returned. So once again, I'm pulling up my remote host, and I'm going to populate the IP address, username, and password. And you can see the different actions associated with these two, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so the NRPE wizard is installing. So basically, it's pushing over the MSI package, running the installer, copying over the config INI file, and starting up the service. And you can see I just did check NRPE-H, and now it's accepting connections. I believe I'm just going to run a basic command to check CPU stats. And then specifying warning and critical levels here. So as you can see now, it's returning data via check NRPE. Okay. So the next thing, now I'm going to basically run uninstall. And this is going to basically do the inverse. So it's going to copy over the MSI package and just run it with the argument for uninstall. And basically now you can see the NRPE agent has been, or NSClient has been uninstalled from this machine. And we can probably fast forward here. So I'm just showing the connections are dropping off now that the client's been uninstalled. Okay, so that was pretty neat. Now the other thing is, say you already have NRPE or check NT installed, or you want to install some custom configurations. So basically everything we've looked at is already pre-templated for us. But you can actually configure a lot of these options right from within the Npush front end. Some of the sections that have been pre-built, modules, crash settings, the log, NSClient, NRPE, and external scripts. These basically correspond to the section headings in the INI file. Apparently I can't remember my username and password here. Okay, so administrator, then I'm going to put in my password, and we're going to see what the custom configuration interface looks like. So as soon as you click custom down here, it shows you the different settings that you can enable for the INI file. So basically on the fly, you no longer have to go into the text file and manually edit these options. And I'm also showing you how once you click on check NT, it pre-populates all of the custom ones for you. So again, like here's the crash settings. Normally in the INI file you would say =1 to turn on or enable or something like that. Now Npush just offers the drop-down interface where you can just select it to be on or off. And so basically here I'm just demonstrating how it's randomly generating a password to throw in that password field when we choose the check NT option. Log file settings, NSClient file specific settings, and then NRPE specific settings. Once again, once you click on NRPE, it's going to populate the required fields for monitoring via NRPE, at least that are defaulted when running the Nagios XI NRPE wizard. So now I'm just expanding everything to give you guys an idea of what the full page expanded would look like. So these are all the configurable settings that are currently built in. So let's say that we do a deployment and I'm going to push something with a wrong password. Okay, so current password has been set to wrong password. I'm going to go into the INI file, and if you look down, yeah, there we go. Notepad++ a little easier. Okay, so wrong password has been added into this INI file. Now, I'm just going to choose to update this config from the remote, from our Npush interface here. So I just choose update settings. That's not going to install the agent, just push over the updated config. And we're pushing the right password this time. And there, as you can see, the INI file has been updated on the Windows side. And uninstall agent, actually we saw an example of that, so I think we can probably skip through that part. So some of the advantages, again, is the no prerequisite software on the client side. In order to do these installs, obviously, it needs to have a valid admin account, or at least a user account with the privilege to install the application and start the service. It also relies on port 445 for SMB. And it's been tested with Windows XP 2003, Vista 2008-7. So a little explanation about what's actually happening under the hood now. So the very first stage when you initiate an installation is it connects over the host and it builds a seed file. And what we use the seed file for is basically to facilitate communication back and forth with the Nagios XI server. So it basically communicates via HTTP at that point. So once the seed file is in place, we run any pre-install instructions. So a pre-install instruction might look something like, if the file does not exist, so on and so forth. And these are all instructions that we'll look at within the recipe file, so we can actually dig a little deeper than what's actually presented on the web interface. It also does a get WMI architecture, so it automatically detects if it's a 32 or 64-bit OS, and it will push the appropriate package. So once the prerequisite stage is complete, it goes into the action portion. So the seed file has been placed on the remote machine. It sends the URL to the host, and then that URL points back to Nagios, which is running Apache, and gives it the proper URL to request the file. So then Apache pushes, or basically the host pulls the file back at this point. And then we run the actions. So some of the example one, MSI exec. So it's just going to MSI exec the package. And then it will be at the post stage. And at the post install stage is where we do things like copy the files, kickstart the service, things of that nature. So basically, under the hood, Npush is a Python application, which I've been developing. So you can see that you can actually run this straight from the command line. And you give it the username, the password, credentials. When you select D for deploy, that's where you actually give it the tarball or the archive. And the archive contains all of the install files needed, as well as what the instructions are to install those files. So for example, in the example we looked at, it contained NSClient ++ 0.3.9.msi for the 32 and the 64-bit version, as well as the instructions to install that. There's also a demonstration of one that I put together, which will just actually install some external scripts along with NSClient. Oh, sorry.
I saw the J option. What's the JSON file?
Yeah, so basically that's how I'm interfacing with the web front end. So it's passing a JSON object to the Python file.
And then it sends that to the web?
Well, basically, so basically, when you use the web front end, that's creating the JSON file, which is kind of like a dictionary. And then, so it basically populates all the install settings that are run at install time. And then under the hood, basically, it calls the Python file and passes it the JSON file. So
you
when
could write a file like that, like the web wizard creates. You
Yep.
could write that JSON and run it.
Exactly. Yep. So you could basically build your own JSON file and tarball or archive. You don't actually need to supply any of the IP address, username, password if you use the JSON file option. Good question. Does anybody else have any questions at this point? Okay. Sorry, I guess this guy was...
Just a couple of questions. When it provides the host address, the IP address of the Nagios server, when we push ours out, we also have the host address of another Nagios server for test and dev purposes.
Right.
Can we include that?
Certainly. Actually, in the web front end, you can actually provide a comma-separated value list of IP addresses.
Yep.
So the allowed host field,
Right.
you can populate in, multiple IP addresses. So, yep.
Sometimes we have a separate ini file for different hosts because we have different scripts and different checks that are like an Exchange server and that's relative to that server and the databases on that server.
Sure. Actually, at the end of the next couple of slides, we'll be showing how you can actually template that archive, and then you can store it on the Nagios side for multiple host deployments such as that. That portion hasn't actually been built into the front end yet, but you can do it on the back end, which we'll take a look at. So,
One last question.
sure.
When we add a new script to our common ini file,
Yep.
and we also supply the script,
Yep.
we then have to send that out to all the hosts, stop the service, restart the service. Can you do that with this? Can you, all your known configured hosts, go and update the scripts?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yep.
Is this available for the core version to use from the command line?
Correct. This will basically be a late addition in the 2012 Nagios, and it will include the Python file under the hood for running via the command line if you'd like.
Okay, so can I download it for core now?
Can you download it for core now? It's currently not posted for deployment yet. Within, I would say, about a month of some more testing, then yes, it will be available for core.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll take a little bit of a look at how the recipe files actually look at this point. So what I have here is the instructions for installing NSClient that we were looking at. So basically, this is just a Python exec file that is passed to the Npush Python under the hood, and it's going to go through and it's going to execute each one of these line by line. So in this example, I'm setting the 32-bit file to be this MSI package, the 64-bit file to be this MS file package, the INI file to be this, and then I'm basically creating two arrays. I would actually like to abstract this a little further so you don't necessarily have to be a programmer to configure this, but so basically we're building the array of required files. So we have install32 and install64. And then here's actually the commands that are being run on the remote host. So we have the command definitions 1, 2, and 3, and then we're making an array of those command definitions. So like the first command definition is to do the MSI execute of the 32-bit package. It's going to copy from the temp directory of the Windows host into the program files directory of NSClient and start the service. And then likewise, a list of install instructions for the 64-bit option. Basically, the only real difference here is just we're specifying the 64-bit installer. And so here's basically the predefined ones when the uninstall option is selected or specified in the JSON file. So it basically stops the NSClient++ service and then runs the MSI execute with the /x option for uninstall. And then likewise, there's a 64-bit counterpart. So to your point about deploying just scripts, for example, so you can see how this instruction set could be modified to do just that. So you would specify, maybe you only want the scripts to be ran on the remote system. And then you would not want like the MSI execute to install, but you would only want the copy commands to install. Yep. So let's see. And then further down here, we're specifying this is the directory that the clients, where the software is basically placed on the local Nagios machine. And then basically, here's like the URL path that the clients are being pointed to download those files. And then there's also a dictionary of values that can be generated at install time. And we'll look a little bit at how the templates work. And then basically here is, Boolean values for if we want to deploy the INI file. So here's basically the prepackaged template for NSClient 0.3.9. So basically, when you're using the web front end, it's basically doing a regular expression match for double curly brackets. And when we select modules, it's basically uncommenting and replacing with the uncommented version of those modules. The idea is basically this would be very simple then to also do for NSClient 0.4.9. We would just add in the appropriate template data. So further on in the settings section, likewise, we're matching for double curly brackets and what the value equals, and we're replacing that during the install. So basically then, this is all wrapped up in an archive. So obviously, if you're specifying files to be copied and run onto the remote system, you'll want to include that in the archive, along with install.py as required. Otherwise, you can put whatever files in here you'd like. Okay, and so here's basically just a custom one that I put together. So so this one's actually doing a lot more than just copying over just the config file. This one's also copying over any external scripts that we'd like to run on the remote system. So we're specifying check domain controller, check installed apps, check updates, and then to the command definition, we need to copy each one of those files as well. And similarly, if we look at I guess I can just do this. So basically, this one, since it's not actually being modified by the front end, this is all happening under the hood on the command line. I just included what the baseline template is that I wanted to push for just these particular hosts. So there's no regular expression matching or anything happening like that. This is just basically going to copy over this template, this INI file as it is, along with the other external scripts and kickstart the service. So if we go down, so then basically within this archive, I've defined the external scripts to run. So I think that the foundation is pretty solid for pushing to one host at a time. My next revision will basically be to deploy to a subnet or list of IP addresses. I actually have a working prototype where you can just give it a CSV file and it will basically loop through. It'll detect what the delimiter is in that CSV file and loop through for all those hosts. But then the goal is to add that into the front end as well, and then to add some other prepackaged ones such as NSClient 0.4, NRDS-Win, NSCA, and others if anyone has any suggestions on that. And then also within the web front end, the goal is to basically be able to define some of those recipes so that it's easier, so you don't have to actually go in and modify the INI file and push everything like that. And then also to do configuration management. So that's another goal, is to basically have this so that it will pull the configuration files from the remote machines and let you modify them real time. Currently, you basically are overwriting the INI file that exists on the remote host each time you update the settings. So All right, questions?
You mentioned CSVs to update multiple hosts. Is there a plan to leverage, Nagios' existing host groups to do the same sort of thing?
That is a good question. I have not considered that, but
Okay.
that's a good question. Maybe we can talk more about that afterwards.
Cool.
Thanks.
I was thinking about when you're doing the copying scripts, everything goes to the temp directory, like extracts the archive and then copies them to the location and then obviously deletes everything in the temp directory.
Well, actually, everything is left in the temp directory because it's basically a temp directory. So the temp data is cleaned up periodically via Windows, but that is a good point. That is an option that could be added, that it would also delete those temporary files as well.
I suppose my suggestion I have is, in terms of virtualization and thin provisioning, let's say you had 2 megabytes worth of scripts, and that is going to be copied to every virtual machine, and then that's going to be written to the disks on every virtual machine, and then it will then be copied to the scripts directory as well. So 2 megs becomes 4 megs, and 4 megs across 100 becomes 400 megs, and you're starting to... I know it's not a lot of disk space, but
Right.
For 100 machines is not much, but 10,000 machines it becomes
Sure.
more.
Yep.
A suggestion would be to copy the scripts from the Apache directly to the scripts location.
Well, so that is a good point. That is a very good suggestion. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, this tool, as I envisioned it, if you have like 100,000 hosts, you're probably going to want to use something like Microsoft SCCM, just for the pure scalability of a solution like that. This is a very good solution for a smaller shop that might have 50 or 100 clients and doesn't necessarily want to set up a domain controller and all of the other prerequisites, but that is a good suggestion. All right, so I'm getting the 10-minute warning here. Go ahead.
I may not be fully understanding it, but it seems like there's still some requirements of the Windows host that would have to be met. Like, I'm not sure that an average Windows host in a secure environment would be listening on HTTP, and would you have to have Python available on that host, things like that?
So basically, Python, all of the Python interaction is being run on the Linux side. So Python is not required. It's basically using like SMB share, which is similar to file and print share in a Windows environment. So it's you do have to make sure that those ports are open, and then it's downloading from HTTP. So it's initiating the communication. So you wouldn't necessarily have to open up. The port 80 would have to be open up on the Linux side, of course. But so basically, those are the pre-requirements, that the file and print sharing port would be open on the Windows host, and a valid username or password. It's using the Windows authentication to validate the username and password. So.
And also understanding that if you have other scripts that you're using to monitor, your own custom scripts and things, you could push those with the package as well.
Correct. Yep.
Any other questions for Yancy?
There was another video demonstration of pushing NRPE and all the custom scripts. We can take a look at that. Otherwise, if you guys have other questions, feel free to jump in. Okay, so just one last demonstration, and that is, so we looked at the custom configuration file that contained all of the custom scripts that we wanted to run on a remote host, including the check domain controller and check updates. So this is just an example of that running. So because we defined everything within the recipe file, actually let me just back up here for a second. So because everything was defined in the recipe file, we just selected none from the web interface. Again, this is something you could just push from the Python command line or the bash shell, run it with Python, you know what I mean? So once that's been run, we're just using the NRPE monitoring wizard, which makes it very easy to just select which scripts you want to look at and run specifically. So the default is check memory, check CPU, check disk as defined by the wizard. Because in this custom tarball created with Npush, we have these other custom scripts. We're just basically adding them in for monitoring. What's that? So is this NS? Sorry, I didn't.
Is this currently in the Nagios Server 2012 release candidate 4? This whole functionality?
This is currently Nagios XI 3.3. It's basically just running a custom component that I built in, but it will be included within
Sorry, the whole
2012.
Npush package, the whole thing, is that in the...
It's a component.
Right,
So,
okay, right,
yep.
sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so actually that's a good point. I don't know if you... So basically on the left-hand side of the admin menu, Npush software, it's under the components along with like NRDS config manager. So, yeah. Yeah, that's a good key piece to mention. So, yeah, this demonstration is kind of funny because when I first deployed this, there was a problem with this check DC script. So I'm basically troubleshooting that. But the point of it is now you have this being monitored via NRPE and you pushed your custom install scripts directly from the Nagios XI front end. So. All right, any other questions?
So is that component part of the release candidate?
That hasn't been worked out yet. So it's planned to be a late addition to 2012.
Is there any way we can do some beta testing?
Yes, definitely. If you're interested in beta testing, let me know. Okay, any other questions?
Along those lines, as it releases and you could use it from command line without the XI interface,
Correct.
would that be feasible on an earlier version, you know, before you go to the new Nagios and new
Yep.
XI?
Yeah, there's nothing within the newer versions of 2012 that is required for Npush to function. Yep, that's true.
All right, any other questions for Yancy here? I guess we can wrap it up. Let's give him a big round of applause.